As an initial matter, Committee Rule 5.4 states that unless otherwise ordered by joint determination made by the chair and vice chair, no confirmation hearing shall be held sooner than 7 calendar days after receipt of the background questionnaire, financial disclosure statement, and responses to additional pre-hearing questions. While the committee received most of the nominees' materials at least 7 days in advance, we received the final batch of documents within that 7-day time frame. Nevertheless, the vice chairman graciously has agreed to a joint determination to hold this hearing so we could get them done before our upcoming recess. Also, I would like to remind all those in attendance that while you're welcome to observe today's hearing, Vice Chairman Warner and I are in agreement that we will not allow disruptions by the audience. Audience members may not verbally or physically distract from the hearing, including by shouting, standing, raising signs, making gestures that block the view of members of the audience, or otherwise annoying the chairman. Those who do so will be immediately escorted from the room. Our goal in conducting this hearing is to enable the committee to begin consideration of the nominees' qualifications and to allow for our members' thoughtful deliberation. Each nominee here has provided substantive written responses to dozens of questions presented by the committee. Today, of course, members will be able to ask additional questions and hear from the nominees. The nominees before the committee today are exceptionally well qualified, capable, and impressive individuals with accomplished careers in public service. Their records and achievements speak for themselves. First, Mr. Lukas has made an outside impact on our national security through his service as a career CIA officer and station chief, and through joint duty rotations with the National Security Council and the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. With more than 20 years of intelligence experience, Mr. Lukas has the knowledge, know-how, and expertise needed to assist Director Gabbard in returning our intelligence community to its core mission of aggressively stealing secrets from our adversaries. He is joined today by his wife. This committee is eager to see the ODNI return to its original size, scope, and mission, which is why I am pleased to support President Trump's decision to nominate Mr. Lukas to be the Principal Deputy Director of National Intelligence. Next, Mr. Kent's 20 years of military service during the War on Terror provides him with the experience and knowledge needed to lead the fight against terrorism as the Director of the National Counterterrorism Center. Serving as a Green Beret and later a CIA officer, Mr. Kent has dedicated his entire career to courageously hunting down terrorists and keeping Americans safe. He knows firsthand the threat that terrorism presents to our homeland and the devastation it causes. His first wife, Shannon Kent, was killed while serving in Syria in 2019, for which we all express our continued sympathy and gratitude for her service. Mr. Kent is a soldier and a patriot who is the right person to lead the National Counterterrorism Center. Last but not least, Mr. Eisenberg's national security expertise and legal counsel have proven indispensable to the President and senior government officials. In the first Trump administration, Mr. Eisenberg served as the legal advisor to the National Security Council, assistant to the President, and deputy counsel to the President for National Security Affairs. He also previously served at the Department of Justice, where he advised the Attorney General and numerous senior other officials on complex matters, including counsel in the intelligence community. I commend President Trump for nominating Mr. Eisenberg, who has the experience with national security and foreign relations law necessary to serve as the Assistant Attorney General for the National Security Division at the Department of Justice. Finally, I want to note that Mrs. Lukas, Mrs. Eisenberg, and Mr. Kent's family are here today to support our nominees. They have all supported our nominees' years of service to their country, and I thank them all for being here. I now recognize the Vice Chairman for his opening remarks.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize to the committee. I thought we were going to maybe wait till after the third vote. My mistake, although obviously the Democrats didn't fully appreciate it. And I come running in, and I think, I just saw Chairman Crawford last night, and now and Chris Miller, like, I'm going, did you guys switch up on me on the 11th hour? So, but I know you're here to introduce and our nominees. I do see our nominees behind us, and I did promise the chairman that I will maybe cut my rant by a minute or two because of my tardiness. A minute or two only, Jim Risch. I want to welcome our witnesses and congratulations. As the chairman said, you've all been nominated to serve in very important positions, and obviously you've all provided service to our country before. I do want to remind you, and I find this is terribly important, when you raise your hand to serve, you're taking an oath not to one person, but to the Constitution. and every single American who has put their trust in that document. These three positions are all, as we know, terribly important. They were all created after 9/11. And to make sure we wouldn't have that type of tragedy again. To make sure that we prevent that, I think you all will have to both ensure that you're able to maintain trust not only with the American people, but also, quite candidly, with our allies and partners. You're going to have to inspire a workforce that candidly has been rocked, I think, in the opening days of this administration. And most importantly, and I'm going to try to drill down on this, is you got to be willing to speak truth to power, even if that means costing your job. Mr. Kent, you have been nominated to lead the agency most central to our fight against foreign terrorists. Echoing what Senator Cotton said, I'd like to thank you again for your willingness to serve once again. And after such a long career in both the military and the IC, and echoing, the loss that your family took in defending our nation. Given your background, you clearly have the experience to do this job. I have no question about your patriotism or your commitment. I do have some questions about your judgment, and we'll get into that in this hearing. Because I said, when we met, I have particular concerns you made during your congressional campaigns, where you called for defunding the FBI and cutting the CIA, or when you called Zelensky a thug, quote, a thug installed by a U.S.-backed color revolution. And obviously, I hope you will clarify those comments in your statement and in the questioning. Mr. Lukas, as a former CIA officer who has served in the field, you understand better than most the importance of building trust. I got to ask you, though, how can our allies and partners be expected to trust our world when we do things like threaten to kick Canada out of the Five Eyes, or impose tariffs even with the new delay on partners like Australia, who we actually have a trade surplus with? I worry, particularly when we see that reliance on our partners, when sometimes classified information has been treated so casually and carelessly that literally this information was getting out about an attack on the Houthis while our pilots were flying. It concerns me greatly, and the fact that nobody's been held accountable to that continues to bother me. And lastly, Mr. Eisenberg, your role will take on increased importance in the coming year as your team will be responsible for the reauthorization of FISA Section 702. We all know 702 makes up about 60% of the president's daily brief, and it obviously has got its challenges. I think we made strong reforms, but taking that role is going to be a challenge. If confirmed, the three of you will not have easy tasks. The world has obviously become more complicated and dangerous, and I question at times the fact that it appears the administration, particularly vis-a-vis our friends and allies, is actually making America less prepared to take on this challenge. Again, I've shared with my colleagues a couple of this. I've not had a chance before in a public setting. I was deeply concerned when the president fired the director and deputy director of the NSA and several of the senior staff at the NSC, including, I would argue, a number of well-respected Republican staffers who worked for members of this committee. All because this individual, Laura Loomer, who claimed that 9/11 was an inside job, claimed that a weather machine controlled by Nikki Haley caused snowstorms in Iowa or Italy, that the First Lady of Florida, Casey DeSantis, lied about her cancer, and that school shootings are staged. I don't know any administration would let anyone with those views within 100 yards of the Oval Office, let alone giving the president a hit list of who to go after. We also know, that one of the president's first actions was celebrating the arrest of the terrorist who planned the Abbey Gate bombings. But the truth is, the president, before that time, fired the FBI leaders who were in charge of that investigation. I mean, I question how any of these actions make our country safer. Or firing the folks who were responsible for security of our country's nuclear stockpile. Or I can increasingly worry about the firings and the potential of additional firings at CISA when we still have China and potentially other countries deep into our telecom networks and taking advantage of those vulnerabilities. We've obviously also seen, and I know there are more firings to come, and like the CIA. You know, we finally documented that it's close to $400,000 to get a CIA officer through security clearance and training, and just firing folks because they've been hired in the last 2 years, as a former business guy, makes no sense to me. We also know, and again, we have litigated this at times, but the notion that the information, classified information that was relayed on Signal is enormously troubling to me, that there's been no accountability. We still don't know if the phones used have been scraped for malware. And we've learned subsequently that there were 20 additional group chats that included discussion of matters like Ukraine and Gaza. And you know, why was that done, and why hasn't there been any accountability? And again, as I mentioned earlier, the firings of people like General Hawk at NSA and Admiral Chatfield at NATO. I will skip the part where I was down in Hampton Roads and where the Truman had been deployed from, and I'm not going to skip it, I guess, but where the community there was frankly incensed about this classified information getting out, because they had loved ones on the Truman, and they know if that information had gotten out and gotten to the hands of the Houthis, it could have been a real challenge. You know, again, we know, and you all as intelligence professionals and the folks who are going to introduce you know, that we are made safer by our collaboration with our allies. And I worry whether our allies are going to continue to share information with us when we don't keep classified information classified. And we'll never know for sure what they haven't been willing to share. So I think the actions of this administration, I appreciate your willingness to serve, but I'm going to continue to come back to that point of, will you be willing to speak truth to power, even if that costs your job? Because that is the only way, having an independent, non-political IC, can we actually guarantee America's security. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. As the Vice Chairman alluded to, there are ongoing votes on the Senate floor in addition to at least one other committee meeting. So if senators are coming and going, it's not because we find you boring. It's because we have to get to other business, and maybe we think that you're going to be easily confirmed on a large bipartisan vote. Before we get to the witnesses, we do have three distinguished officials here to introduce them. For Mr. Lukas, we have the Chairman of the House Intelligence Committee and Congressman from the finest state in the Union, Rick Crawford. Take it away, Rick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate the opportunity to introduce the committee to Mr. Aaron Lukas, the nominee for Principal Deputy Director of National Intelligence. As I'm sure you would agree, Mr. Chairman, as with oversight of the intelligence community, what our IC today needs is more leadership from Arkansas. Aaron grew up in Jacksonville, Arkansas, where his family moved before his first birthday. He attended school right there next to Little Rock Air Force Base, which likely influenced his interest in serving his nation on the front lines of our national security challenges. Aaron attended the University of Texas. Try not to hold that against him. He traveled to the United States, and he began to expand his understanding of foreign cultures and languages by traveling and teaching English in former Warsaw Pact countries. Like many in his generation, the al-Qaeda attacks against the United States on September 11, 2011, drew Aaron to public service. An economist by trade, he began work for the U.S. Trade Representative and was subsequently recruited by the Central Intelligence Agency to work as an analyst. Wanting to expand his service, Aaron moved to the CIA's Directorate of Operations and served globally with distinction. After proving himself in the field, Aaron was called to leadership, serving in the Office of the Director of National Intelligence and the National Security Council staff. Aaron has served under multiple administrations from both parties with the appropriate integrity of an intelligence officer. It certainly will be good to have someone with his operational background in the ODNI leadership. Mr. Chairman, I'm confident your committee will give him proper review given his extensive and honorable public service. And with that, it's my pleasure to introduce and recommend to the committee Mr. Aaron Lukas.
Thank you, Mr. Crawford. You're welcome to stay for all of our festivities. I know you'll find them fascinating, but I also know there's a lot of business in the House if you need to get back over there. For Mr. Kent, we have the former director of the National Counterterrorism Center, as well as former acting Secretary of Defense Christopher Miller. Mr. Miller, take it away.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, members of this incredibly important committee. I'm Chris Miller. I had the privilege of being unanimously confirmed by this committee and the Senate in August 2020 to serve as the 7th director of the United States National Counterterrorism Center. When I left public office in 2021, I vowed never again to appear before Congress. But when your Army buddy, Joe Kent, an Army buddy who is universally known in the 5th Special Forces Group, that was the organization that we served together in, he was known as the best soldier in the unit. When he asks you to introduce him for this confirmation hearing for the same position I once held, it was incomprehensible for me to say no. Joe, this is an honor of a lifetime. Thank you for your willingness to re-enter public service after an enormously impactful career as an Army Green Beret and a member of our nation's most elite counterterrorism and hostage rescue task force, followed by continued service in harm's way after your retirement from the Army as a CIA paramilitary officer. I was beyond gratified when, after you left public service, you decided to run for Congress to represent a new generation of Americans that viscerally understand the life and death consequences of the decisions that are made in these chambers. Your willingness to run for elected office when you experienced at the essence of our political experiment that those sitting before me know all so well was an act of commitment and moral courage that oftentimes concerned me. I was frankly mortified as your good name and stellar reputation for principled leadership and selfless service were attacked. I'm sure there were times when, embroiled in political combat, you thought you would rather be back in foreign fields of strife and battle. But I was always reminded of President Theodore Roosevelt's thoughts about being in the arena, and it's not the critic who counts. Thanks for being the defining leader of your generation, and thank you, the members of this important committee, for your willingness to be in the arena in your service to our nation in this time of profound change and risk. It is with enormous honor and humility that I introduce Joe Kent for your consideration to be the next director of the National Counterterrorism Center, one of the most unknown yet impactful organizations in the intelligence community. Established by this committee after al-Qaeda's 2001 assault in America, it has developed the most cutting-edge tools, processes, and procedures undergirded by a fervently dedicated cadre of analysts to guarantee that our nation never suffers such a cataclysmic attack again. But the most dedicated and skilled people, technology, or standing operating procedures, and frankly, support of this committee are meaningless without thoughtful, purposeful, and principled leadership. With your foresight and support, that leader will be Joe Kent of the state of Washington, a former Army Green Beret, special operator, paramilitary officer, who has not only consumed intelligence on the ground throughout the world, but has conducted all aspects of the intelligence cycle. He is uniquely qualified to bring an operator's view to the halls of the NCTC. But he also has a unique perspective on what happens when our intelligence community fails. On January 16th, 2019, his soulmate and wife, Shannon, a senior Navy Chief Petty Officer and a trailblazer in our special operations community, and most significantly, birth mother of their 2 sons, was killed in northeast Syria when a human intelligence meeting was compromised. Guaranteeing that no other family ever experiences that unfathomable heartache is Joe Kent's professional purpose in life. Boys, thanks for being the joy of your father's life and his inspiration. Heather, thank you for serving in our nation's Army, and now, in your next career, thank you for your love and support of Joe and the boys and being the foundation of such a wonderful family. I don't need to tell this committee that we are in the midst of an epochal change of the global order, and our national security enterprise is woefully behind in transforming to keep pace with the threats. There is no one, and I mean no one, more qualified than this nominee to lead the National Counterterrorism Center into this next era. This committee is vital to overseeing the essential eyes and ears of our national security enterprise, so we maintain deterrence through world-class intelligence capabilities to provide decision makers such as yourself and our field commanders with decisive advantage. But the old ways of throwing more money and people at a problem after catastrophic surprise will no longer suffice. We need people of vision and experience. Joe Kent is that person of vision and experience to lead the women and men of the little-known treasure of the National Counterterrorism Center into the future. Joe Kent is a man of enormous courage, integrity, morality, and understands better than anyone in this room the meaning of sacrifice and the importance of accountable leadership. It is with enormous gratitude to our great nation and this committee that I present to you for your constitutionally mandated role, Mr. Joe Kent of Washington, for your consideration for service as the 9th Director of the National Counterterrorism Center. Thank you very much for the time.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. And for Mr. Eisenberg, we have our own distinguished colleague, Senator Cornyn.
Thank you, colleagues. I'm pleased to introduce John Andrew Eisenberg, President Trump's nominee to serve as Assistant Attorney General for National Security at the National Security Division at the Department of Justice. Mr. Eisenberg currently serves as a senior counselor to the DNI, the Director of National Intelligence, to the Attorney General, Pam Bondi. During President Trump's first term, he served as assistant to the President, Deputy Counsel to the President for National Security Affairs, and as a legal advisor to the National Security Council. But his government service did not start there. Mr. Eisenberg has a long history of government service, particularly in national security matters. Between 2004 and 2009, Mr. Eisenberg served at the Department of Justice as an Associate Attorney General in the Office of the Deputy Attorney General, as a Deputy Assistant Attorney General in the Office of Legal Counsel, and as counsel to the Assistant Attorney General and as a Special Assistant for Counterterrorism. He was a law clerk for Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas and Michael J. Luttig on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit. He earned his Bachelor of Science degree in mathematics from Stanford and his law degree from Yale. His wide breadth of experience will serve him well for the challenges that lie ahead. Our nation and the Department of Justice face many challenges from unrelenting foreign adversaries who want to weaken the United States. I'm confident that Mr. Eisenberg understands the gravity of these threats. He knows firsthand the constant vigilance required and the authorities needed in order for the Department of Justice, alongside of the intelligence community, to successfully and effectively protect Americans and American interests. One such example is his understanding of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, Section 702 authority, and its value in the interests of the United States. I've had discussions with FBI Director Patel and CIA Director Ratcliffe about this on a number of occasions, and how we must not willingly or inadvertently impair law enforcement and the intelligence community's ability to identify national security threats in real time. Mr. Eisenberg shares these views, and I'm grateful for that. This is just one compelling example of the depth of knowledge and experience that Mr. Eisenberg will bring to this important role in President Trump's administration. I'm confident that he will serve our country honorably and always put America first. Mr. Eisenberg, congratulations on your nomination, and I look forward to voting for it at the first opportunity.
Thank you, Senator Cornyn. If our witnesses could please take their seats at the table. Gentlemen, before we move to your statements, I need to ask you to answer 5 routine questions that the committee poses to each nominee who appears before us. They require a simple yes or no answer on the record. First, do you agree to appear before the committee here or in other venues when invited? Second, if confirmed, do you agree to send officials from your office to appear before the committee and designated staff when invited? Third, do you agree to provide documents and any other materials requested by the committee in order for us to carry out our legislative and oversight responsibilities? Fourth, will you ensure that your office and your staff provide such material to the committee when requested? Fifth, do you agree to inform and fully brief to the fullest extent possible all members of this committee of intelligence activities and covert actions rather than only the chairman and vice chairman? Thank you all very much. After the hearing today, it's my intention to move quickly to convene a committee business meeting to vote on the nominations and report them to the Senate for a prompt vote there as well. We will now proceed to opening statements, after which I will recognize members by seniority at the gavel for 5 minutes each. We will start with Mr. Lukas, followed by Mr. Kent, and concluding with Mr. Eisenberg. Mr. Lukas.
Thank you. Chairman Cotton, Vice Chairman Warner, and distinguished members of the committee, it's an honor to appear before you as President Trump's nominee for Principal Deputy Director of National Intelligence. I want to thank the President for his confidence in me, and I also want to thank Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, for her outstanding leadership of the organization so far. And finally, and most of all, I'm grateful to my wonderful wife, Carrie, who is here today, and to my 5 children, who unfortunately could not attend. Without their steadfast love and support over the years, I have no doubt I would not be sitting before you right now. I will confess, it is a strange feeling to be in the public spotlight today. For the past 20-plus years, I've worked as a CIA operations officer in the shadows, never calling attention to my real work, staying away from social media, and being active on the front lines of intelligence. I've lived my covers, sometimes even operating under different names. I was honored to serve my country in this capacity, to support America's political leaders and warfighters alike with unbiased, apolitical intelligence. And I was privileged to work with many dedicated patriots at the CIA and across other U.S. government agencies. Not long ago, Director Gabbard sat before this committee and discussed her determination to rebuild an intelligence community with a laser-like focus on our essential mission, ensuring the safety, security, and freedom of the American people. I wholeheartedly share this vision, as do countless other career intelligence officers. What I have seen from the inside, unfortunately, is an IC that is too often aimless, bloated, risk-averse, and disconnected at times from the core mission of intelligence. My aim, if confirmed, is to support Director Gabbard by giving a voice to those unknown and unsung officers doing the hard work of intelligence every day. The operations officers, the analysts, the covert action specialists, the technical collectors, and all those people who support them. The men and women of the U.S. intelligence community do dangerous, important work that is critical to our nation's security. But that doesn't mean that all is well within the IC. Over the decades, America's intelligence agencies have morphed into large bureaucracies in which the majority of people have little to no direct connection to how intelligence is collected, analyzed, and presented to policymakers. Reporting chains have grown unwieldy at times, paralyzing even simple decision-making. Managers are incentivized to avoid risk and not rock the boat. Huge sums of taxpayer money are spent on technology projects that at times are outdated before they're deployed, or worse, lack any connection from the beginning to the actual needs of operators and analysts. Priorities that have nothing to do with intelligence have taken center stage at times, distracting us from mission. President Trump and Director Gabbard have already taken important steps to reverse the decline of the IC, most notably by getting rid of a toxic diversity, equity, and inclusion political dogma that at best was a distraction and at worst pitted IC officers against one another. I will never forget the first Chief of Station seminar that I attended, where the senior-most Director of Operations Human Resources officer blithely informed the attendees that it does not matter how good your operations are in station, unless you advance a major DEI reform, you will not get promoted. Think of that. Chiefs of station, who also serve, by the way, as the DNI representatives, are supposed to be in those positions because they've proven they're capable field officers, because they're the best at doing real intelligence work, at working with our partners, at stealing vital secrets. And until recently, the official message they were getting was, your job is really to advance a political agenda and not to protect the country. As one of those field officers and as a former analyst, I can tell you there are huge numbers of dedicated patriots in the IC who are thrilled we have an administration that just wants them to get back to work, that wants them to use their talents and skills to protect the American people, to keep politicization out of intelligence, to have high expectations and take reasoned risks. An administration that understands that risky ventures mean there will at times be failures, but that timidity is not an option. To those dedicated professionals in the IC, I promise you, if confirmed as PD DNI, I will always have your backs, even when you fail, as long as you're doing your best for the American people. And I will be supporting a director who feels exactly the same way. ODNI has a unique role to play in the IC. It's the institution where all streams of foreign intelligence and law enforcement information come together. The DNI is the President's principal intelligence advisor, and the ODNI produces the President's daily brief. Taking direction from the White House, it sets collection priorities, deconflicts on budgets, works to fund and deploy cutting-edge technology, ensures agencies are respecting the privacy and civil liberties of Americans, and keeps Congress informed so that legislative oversight is meaningful. These are all important tasks. But since its creation, many have asked whether the ODNI should even exist. My answer to that question is yes. But like the other IC elements, it must be focused on its unique mission. Too often, ODI has grown without regards to that mission, and it has engaged in business that properly should be conducted by other agencies. Director Gabbard has said she is committed to ensuring ODNI is focused only on what it can do, which will make it a stronger and more effective leader of the IC. If confirmed, I will give her my full support in this endeavor. I want to be clear, my aim is to make ODNI better, not to undermine it. What I bring to this role is the perspective of an intelligence officer who has worked both on the front lines overseas and as a consumer of intelligence at the National Security Council. For every program, every position, every taxpayer dollar that is spent, I will ask, how does this advance the IC's core mission? How does it serve policymakers? And if it doesn't, why are we doing it? I believe asking these questions is how we make the IC stronger and better able to do our duty to protect the American people. Once again, I thank the members of the committee for their consideration, and I look forward to any questions.
Thank you. Mr. Kent.
Thank you, Chairman Cotton. Thank you, Vice Chair Warner. I want to thank the President of the United States and DNI Gabbard for their trust in my leadership and for giving me this opportunity to continue my service to our nation in what I view is the fight of my lifetime and the fight of my generation, and that is the fight against terrorism. Before we get into any of that, I really want to thank Chris Miller for coming here today and saying all those great and wonderful things about me. 20 years ago, Chris was my battalion commander in Iraq. We were knee-deep in that fight, and today this fight still continues. And it is in the honor of all of those who gave their lives in our nation's longest war, in the War on Terror, our generation's war, that I continue this fight for my late wife and for everybody buried in Section 60 of Arlington National Cemetery. Before I talk about my vision as the leader of the National Counterterrorism Center, I really want to thank my family. My wife, Heather, is here. Heather served in Iraq, served in Afghanistan, and after we lost my late wife, Shannon, in a suicide bomber attack in Manbij, Syria, Heather came into our lives. I truly think she's a gift from God. I've been blessed twice, first by Shannon, who gave me my sons, Colt and Josh, and then by Heather coming in and helping us pick up the pieces so that we can continue to serve our country. So I couldn't be more grateful that she's here with us today. Of all the titles I've had in my lifetime as a Green Beret, as a Special Missions Unit operator, as a CIA paramilitary operations officer, the best title I have is Dad. And Colt and Josh bless me with that every single time they call me Dad. So they're here today too, and I couldn't be more honored. My father, Chris Kent, is also here. My dad's basically had my back and been my role model for my entire life. So I couldn't be more honored to have my dad here. My mom is tuning in somewhere on C-SPAN as well. She's taking care of my niece who just joined the world. Amber Grace is our newest addition to the Kent family. So I've got a whole slew of Kents out there watching us on C-SPAN. So I appreciate all their support and love as well. Joining us from the great state of Washington, we've got a couple of our local sheriffs that are here as well. Sheriff Garcia and Sheriff Swank are here as well, so I can't thank them enough for being here to support us. Look, I couldn't be more honored to be nominated by President Trump, and I think this is a very critical time for us to continue the fight against terrorism. I would like to say that, hey, we have accomplished our mission and terrorism is kind of fading into the rearview mirror. I know a lot in our national security establishment, and I know a lot of people in America are sick and tired of us talking about terrorism and the threat that terrorists face to our country and pose to our country. However, the fight continues. And as a matter of fact, I think the threat posed by terrorists is even worse than it ever has been in years previous to this. For the last 4 years, we've had a wide open southern border thanks to the policies of the Biden administration. That let in countless terrorists from newly designated foreign cartels and also from violent gangs that have gone so far as taking over entire apartment complexes inside the United States. This is a direct result of the wide open southern border policy that Joe Biden had. And President Trump is committed to identifying these cartels and these violent gang members and making sure that we locate them and we get them out of our country. We deport them by any means necessary. And I'm honored to support his quest to do that, to secure our country once more. We also have massive terrorist threats coming from overseas, and a lot of this is due to the debacles of the Biden administration. The withdrawal from Afghanistan was catastrophic. It was a horrible way to end one of our nation's longest conflicts. However, it has given a terrorist sanctuary to ISIS and to several other terrorist groups right now that are exploiting that ungoverned space and the leadership of the Taliban. We also had the Biden administration's horrible debacle where they brought tens of thousands of unvetted Afghans into the United States of America. Now, NCTC has done their job, and they've identified over 1,400 of these Afghans as having ties to ISIS and to other terrorist groups, yet Biden let them into the interior of the United States. Same thing with a bunch of ISIS-affiliated Tajiks and Uzbeks who came into the United States of America as well. There's around 600 of them that were also identified by NCTC that are here in America right now because the Biden administration has allowed them to stay inside of our country. Locating these Afghans, locating these Tajiks, Uzbeks, and anyone else who's come into our country who has any ties to any foreign terrorist organization will be one of my top priorities so that we can locate them and we can get them out of our nation to keep our country safe. Another major challenge that we have that I'm honored to support President Trump's prioritization of is actually securing our border. NCTC plays a vital role in screening and vetting anyone who seeks to come into our country and maintaining that database and being able to look into the IC's data and being able to look into local law enforcement data to make sure that we connect all the dots and we don't let any known or suspected terrorists into our country. This is something that the president takes very seriously, and I look forward to supporting him in securing our country and making sure no more terrorists come into the United States of America. The third main line of effort that we have in NCTC, and I think as a counterterrorist enterprise in general, is we have got to be proactive against the terrorist threats that are emanating from overseas. I already talked about Afghanistan. We have a major terrorist sanctuary there. Due to the failed regime change policies in Syria, we now have an al-Qaeda affiliate that is being paraded around as the representative of the Syrian government that is actually being led by a former member of al-Qaeda who was hand-selected by Ayman Zawahiri, one of the 9/11 attack planners, who has now been installed as the president. This sanctuary in Syria poses a major threat to our national security that we have to address. And we have to address this in a very pragmatic way. The past 20-plus years of endless wars and endless deployments overseas have, quite frankly, not addressed the terror threat that we faced after 9/11 and the terror threat that we face right now. We have to find a way to strike a reasonable balance and have sustainable counterterrorism efforts that mostly focus on enabling partners, allies, surrogates, and proxies. And underpinning all of this is accurate intelligence, and that's what NCTC and the intelligence community can provide. Accurate intelligence will prevent us from having more endless wars. It will tell us exactly where the terrorists are overseas so that we can take them out before they come here. Accurate intelligence will stop terrorists from coming into our country, and accurate intelligence is going to help us run down every single terrorist, every single cartel member that's inside the United States of America and get them the heck out of here. Again, I'm honored to be here. I'm honored to be supported by President Trump and DNI Gabbard, and I look forward to our discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Eisenberg.
I'd like to begin by thanking you, Chairman Cotton, and you, Vice Chairman Warner, for holding this hearing. And I'd like to thank Senator Cornyn for his gracious introduction. I'd also like to thank President Trump for the honor of this nomination and the Attorney General for her support and her confidence in me. I'm so fortunate to have the love of my life and my wife. I'll start over. I'm so fortunate to have the love of my life and my best friend here, my wife, Catherine. Somehow she manages to have a full-time job and take care of the rest of the family. It's no exaggeration to say I wouldn't be here without her support. Her support and encouragement throughout most of my life and during the hardest times has made all of the good things in life possible and has made the rest of it livable. My son, Paul, and my eldest daughter, Sarah, couldn't miss school today. I don't remember having that view when I was their age, but that was theirs. My youngest daughter, Evie, can't be with us because she has something called 22q disorder, which is a microdeletion on chromosome 22 and causes developmental delays, among a lot of other things. Evie's an inspiration to everyone who knows her. She doesn't let her disability get in the way, and she greets just about every day with delight. Paul and Sarah aren't that bad either. Catherine, Paul, Sarah, and Evie are the joys of my life, and without them, my life itself would be unimaginable to me. I learned the importance of family from my mom, who at about 5 feet tall was the most powerful woman that anyone had ever met. No one ever wanted to mess with Rhoda. Because of her, my sister Nancy, my brother Ethan, and I couldn't be closer. And while my mom passed away more than 10 years ago, I'm fortunate to have a stepfather and a father who's actually here today, who are very supportive. I also count a very small number of friends as family, and they know who they are. I would like to say something about colleagues. There have been too many to name here, and I've had the privilege of working alongside in all my years of government service and during my time in private practice. I'm truly blessed to have worked with so many who are the embodiment of dedication, blazing intelligence, and integrity. Serving with them has been the honor of a lifetime, and I'm so grateful to know them. National security is the thread that runs through my professional life. I was in Alexandria on September 11, 2001, when terrorists attacked our nation, resulting in deaths of some 3,000 people in coordinated attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon at least. I think it's hard for people who weren't adults in 2001 to understand the effect these attacks had on so many of us. It's easy to forget that follow-on attacks were thought to be very likely. Indeed, our success in thwarting other attacks of that magnitude led many to wonder if the threat had been overblown. But I can't forget that day. I heard explosions caused by a commercial aircraft colliding with the Pentagon, and I saw smoke rising from that building. My wife couldn't come home from her office in Washington for hours because the necessary metro lines go through the Pentagon, and that was still burning. I saw F-16s trailing commercial airliners, I suppose escorting them out of the area. My country had really become a battlefield. In my past government jobs, I focused on national security. The events of 9/11 instilled in me the need to be part of the response to terrorism. My recent government service has shown me the importance of protecting the nation from myriad threats, and I'm deeply committed to the rule of law and the Constitution. But I also believe that the government has a solemn obligation to do what it can within those limits to protect the nation and its people. I was in the Department of Justice when it stood up the National Security Division, and I was part of a team that helped propose and implement the necessary changes to bring NSD into the world. It would be a great honor to lead that division and the dedicated public servants who go to work there every day and who do so because they share the vision of which I spoke, to protect this nation. To everyone in NSD, I look forward to working together, should I be confirmed, to protect this great nation and its people from the range of national security threats facing them. I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you. Mr. Lukas, Congress created the Office of the Director of National Intelligence to eliminate stovepipes of intelligence and to ensure integration across the elements while working hand in hand with the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security. That's the Director of Defense Intelligence and the Principal Advisor to the DNI on Defense Intelligence. To ensure that national and military intelligence needs are met, Congress also sought to ensure analytic objectivity standards were set and they were met. Will you commit to working with this committee to restore the ODNI to what it was originally intended to be?
Yes, Chairman. If confirmed, I would commit to that.
In your experience, is ODI on the path to becoming just a part of the bureaucracy that it was created to eclipse?
Thank you, Chairman. As I said in my opening remarks, I have seen ODNI grow over the years, often without regard to its original mission. So yes, I would agree with that statement. As I said earlier, I believe ODNI has a very important role to play, but we need to ensure that it is focused only on that role and not engaged in business that is properly left to other IC agencies.
Thank you. One point in particular is the relationship between the IC, the intelligence community, and the Department of Defense. I'm not aware of many processes or procedures, at least effective ones, for ensuring the needed collaboration between the DNI and the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security. What are your thoughts on how we can improve that relationship?
Well, Senator, I do agree that that is a critical relationship. The DoD brings a lot to the intelligence community, a lot of resources, a lot of individuals, a lot of power. My understanding is that currently there is a weekly sync between the Director's Advisors for Military Affairs and OSD INS. If confirmed, I would certainly expect that I would also have regular communication with that same office, with the Undersecretary, and I would be willing to work with the committee to look at whether we need any sort of formal processes or procedures to put in place to ensure that that coordination is continuing as it should.
Thank you. Let's turn our attention to China. This year's annual threat assessment stated, quote, China stands out as the actor most capable of threatening U.S. interests globally, end quote. There's, of course, bipartisan support in Congress for ensuring that the Chinese communists don't achieve their goals in replacing the United States as the world's dominant economic and therefore military superpower. What's your opinion on whether the intelligence community is currently properly postured to address the threat posed by communist China?
Thank you for the question, Senator. I have seen over many years as an intelligence officer that the IC has assessed that China is a key adversary and has placed a high priority on collecting and analyzing information to provide to policymakers regarding China's plans and intentions. If confirmed, I would certainly look forward to working with the IC agencies themselves to ensure that they are adequately resourced and are placing those resources in the areas that they need to be vis-a-vis China. That's, of course, if I'm confirmed. I lack that bird's eye view, quite frankly, right now about what each agency is doing, but certainly that would be a priority for me if I'm confirmed.
Thank you. Mr. Kent, I want to turn to the threat of terrorism. China is, without question, our most serious long-term threat, the only nation that has the size and the wealth and power to potentially replace the United States as the world's dominant power. But as you say in your opening statement, the threat of terrorism remains serious and ongoing. To borrow from a quote sometimes attributed to Trotsky, you may not be interested in terrorism anymore, but terrorism is still interested in you. Is that correct and something Americans need to understand?
Thank you, Senator. I think that's 100% accurate. I mean, look, we have real threats that come from the Chinese Communist Party and other traditional state actors. However, terrorists want to kill us right now in this moment, and tragically, many of them are already here inside the United States, and there's countless other adversaries we have that are terrorists overseas that are plotting to kill us right now. So we have to stay vigilant.
Thank you. Vice Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, gentlemen, thank you for your willingness to serve again. Mr. Kent, you're currently acting Chief of Staff to Director Gabbard, right?
Yes, Senator.
Was Director Gabbard consulted before General Hawk was fired as NSA Director?
I was not aware of any conversations that took place, but that doesn't mean they didn't happen.
Okay. I just feel like if she wasn't, I just would be even further concerned that you were taking a 30-year career veteran that had, I believe, almost uniform support, and I think the firing was uncalled for, and I would be concerned if the director hadn't been notified. Mr. Kent, we talked about this before, but I just want to go through it again. You participated in the group chat that was subject of the Atlantic article published by Jeffrey Goldberg on March 24, 2025, correct?
Was I in the chat?
Yes.
I was, Senator, yeah.
Yeah. You were in the chat, yes.
I was.
Yes, sir. Did you use a personal phone or a government phone during that chat?
There's currently ongoing litigation, Senator, so I really can't give any more details.
I'm pretty disappointed by that answer. I'm just asking whether what about this? Do you know whether your device has been actually taken and scanned for any malware that might have been put into it?
We followed all the security procedures and took all security precautions.
You took all security procedures and did everything appropriate. Again, I don't question your patriotism commitment, but I find that an astounding answer. I mean, there have been reports that there were 20 other group chats that Director Waltz had that included subjects like Ukraine, China, Gaza. Were you involved in any of those chats?
I was not.
So any of the other 20 that have been reported, you didn't participate at all in?
Like I said, Senator, there's ongoing litigation about this right now, so there's really not much more I can say.
Has anyone with classification authority reviewed the information. I don't have to read through the comments you made in that chat, but others. I mean, again, you're stating before this committee that information relaying the timing of an attack from American forces that, if it had been discovered, could have cost our pilots' lives. You're still making the statement none of that was classified?
There was no classified information in the chat, and all the circumstances around it are currently under ongoing litigation. So there's not much I can say, Senator.
Well, again, as I said at the outset, I don't doubt your patriotism, but I really doubt your judgment on that. I'll go to you, Mr. Lukas. You also said, and I was really kind of astounded in your pre-questioning hearing, quote, based on your experience, the information presented in the media related to the Atlantic article could be reasonably have been deemed unclassified. You've been a CIA agent a long time. Are you familiar with other times when a defense secretary was willing to share impending military operations on unsecure devices before the operations took place?
Thank you, Senator. I'm a career intelligence officer. I'm not a military officer, so I have not been privy to any war plans in any form, classified or unclassified. So that's really not a
Let's put it,
question.
if you as a CIA officer had released this kind of information or put it on an unsecure device, wouldn't you have been reprimanded or fired?
Senator, really, all I can say is that both the White House and the Department of Defense have said that the information in that chat had not gone through a classification process. I have no reason to doubt that. Otherwise,
Giving out, sir, I mean, again, I respect your service, but giving out on an unsecured commercial connected device information that relays the specifics of an American attack on a foreign adversary, that if it gotten out, I would love both of you gentlemen to come down to Virginia Beach and meet with the 800 plus Virginians who I met with, who many of them knew sailors on the Truman. And the crowd was 90% veterans. Gentlemen, your answers would not stand, they would hoot you out of the room when that kind of information is so carelessly handled. And I can't believe any of the three of you would on your own ever done this, and I find it really disappointing that you're still standing by the flimsy, careless behavior and somehow defending it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Kent, you have an extraordinary career serving your country, 20 years in uniform in the war against terror. You also have worked at the CIA. You're now acting chief of staff at the DNI. So with all that experience, when you were part of the group chat on Signal, did it occur to you during the conversation that, hey, maybe I should say something? Some of the information that is being talked about could jeopardize our warfighters or be useful to the Houthis? Or did you have that thought at any point during the discussion?
I did not, Senator.
So that raises in my mind whether there is routine use of the Signal application platform in order to have conversations about very sensitive information. Maybe it hasn't gone through a classification review, but if you're talking about war plans, that's pretty sensitive information. Is Signal used commonly, to your knowledge, for those kinds of discussions?
Signal was installed on my government work phone when I received it, Senator, and Signal has pretty adequate two-way encryption. So Signal is routinely used and approved by the chain of command.
Does it concern you that one of the people on the group chat was in Russia at the time? We know that Russia's trying very hard to penetrate our communication systems.
There was no classified information discussed on there, Senator, so that was not a concern to me.
Well, I hope this is something, should you be confirmed, that you will take a hard look at. I, too, have the Signal application on my phone, but I don't use it to discuss highly sensitive information. And I think we need perhaps guidelines that are clearer to members of the intelligence community and the Department of Defense to make sure that we don't have a repeat of this. I know that at least you must be concerned that there was a reporter on the phone. Does that concern you?
Most certainly, Senator.
Thank you. I want to turn to a different issue. And as I left to vote, you were starting to get into this. When I look at the most imminent threats facing our nation right now, to me, it's a counterterrorism attack. And ISIS is growing. It's operating in Somalia and Afghanistan. We have ISIS-K. Pakistan. There were over 700 attacks in Syria in 2024 alone. Al-Qaeda is reemerging as well. We know about the Houthis' attacks on our naval ships, on international shipping. My concern is that we've had a shift away from focusing on counterterrorism and instead on great power competition, which certainly is important. But if I look at what I'm most worried about happening tomorrow, it's a terrorist attack. Could you comment on that issue and how you think we balance the competing needs?
Certainly, I share your concerns and I share your view. I mean, the terrorist threats posed by Al-Qaeda, by ISIS, by the Iranian threat network, they're countless and they're unrelenting. And as you pointed out, they've only grown in recent years because of all the different sanctuary countries that our terrorists have been able to cultivate. So I think we have to strike a balance where we have constant vigilance. And I think a lot of this ties back into who we let into our country. I think right now, all the lights are blinking red because we had open borders for the last 4 years. We don't know who's in our country. When NCTC did what they were supposed to do and they identified terrorist threats, they were ignored by the last administration. So this is why I'm very concerned. So focusing heavily on making sure that we locate all the terrorists inside of our country, including the cartels and the criminal terrorist gangs, getting them out of our country, securing the border, that's essential. But then making sure we keep a finger on the pulse overseas, and we do that by enabling our intelligence community.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, as I alluded at the outset, there's other business on the Senate floor to which I have to attend. I'm going to step away. I'm going to put the committee in the capable hands of Senator Budd, who graciously agreed to stay for the duration of my absence. I cannot say how long it will be. It depends on part, I guess, on how persuasive my Democratic colleagues find me over in the Senate. So it may be a long time. But in the meantime, I will recognize Senator Kelly for his 5 minutes and turn the gavel over to Senator Budd. Thank you again.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Kent, on May 2nd, 2011, the U.S. conducted Operation Neptune Spear, in which SEAL Team 6 shot and killed Osama bin Laden, that occurred in Abbottabad, Pakistan. Mr. Kent, you are a special operator. Is that correct?
That's correct, Senator.
Would it have been appropriate for the Obama administration to share on an unsecured app 2 hours prior to that mission that Navy special operators were inbound to Pakistan to conduct that specific operation?
On an unsecure app, absolutely not.
Absolutely not. All right, I just wanted to clarify based on what the chairman just asked you.
Signal is a government-approved two-way encryption that wasn't available in
That is an unsecured platform. It's an application available to the general public. And if you have any experience with the intelligence community, which I think you do, Mr. Kent, is that correct?
That's correct.
You would understand that it is not a secure platform. I want to go on to something else. And this concerns January 6th. Do you believe that the violence on January 6th was intentionally organized or directed?
Still under investigation. We're looking into whether elements of the government could have enhanced the criminal acuity of some of the rioters that day.
So you've said on Twitter that the FBI and the intelligence community were involved in planning and directing the riot. Is that correct?
Sounds like something I said, yeah.
And what evidence do you have for that claim?
So we've already identified that there were multiple confidential human informants ran by the FBI and other law enforcement agencies that were present in the crowd that day, directing, removing barriers, those types of things. This has been investigated widely. We're continuing to look into it. The intelligence, I would say the FBI and other elements of the law enforcement apparatus attempted to suppress the fact that there was undercover confidential human informants that were part of these different groups. We also had intelligence leading up to January 6th that there was going to be violence that day. So that speaks to some degree of intelligence infiltration into some of these groups and organizations.
Who within the FBI?
We're looking into that right now.
Which departments of the FBI?
Probably the Washington field office.
So you believe the Washington field office was involved in the planning of the violence in the building next door on January 6th?
It's being looked into. I mean, look, we had
and who is looking into it?
We are in the intelligence community. Yeah, we're looking into it right now.
And do you believe that the IC conducts actions of this nature against Americans?
Does the IC, both the FBI and other law enforcement agencies, entrapping individuals? If you look at who was running the Washington field office during January 6th, it was Stephen DeAntuono. He was also running the field office in Michigan, where many of the defendants were let go after they were accused of attempting to kidnap the governor, because the vast majority of them were undercover FBI confidential informants. So unfortunately, this behavior does happen by members of law enforcement and the intelligence community, and it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we are transparent with the American people.
Mr. Kent, would you be willing to share this evidence of this investigation with this committee?
I look forward to it, Senator.
All right. Are you aware that procedures for considering candidates for U.S. security clearances have long considered attempts to overthrow the government as a serious red flag?
Yes.
Would you have concerns about giving a security clearance to someone who participated in violent acts at the Capitol on January 6th in an attempt to overturn an election?
I have consistently condemned anyone who used any act of violence against law enforcement or anyone else.
So in your current role as Chief of Staff to the DNI, you would not be in favor of approving any kind of clearance for somebody who participated in any violence against the United States?
No, if you commit an act of violence against a police officer or anybody else, you've got nowhere to go. You get your day in court, and that's it.
So traditionally, the IC's counterterrorism efforts have focused on foreign terrorist organizations, FTO-designated groups. The cartels have now been similarly designated. Would you seek to expand that to other groups you've proposed treating like terrorists?
We've got our work cut out for us right now with imminent threats coming from ISIS, Al-Qaeda, the Iranian Threat Network, the cartels, and violent gangs that were just designated. So I think if another group rises to the threshold of presenting a threat, we would present that to the president and give him the option of designating them.
So do you think there are other groups that have risen to that level?
As of right now, no, I do not.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Cornyn, you're recognized.
Mr. Lukas, as you and I discussed in my office, one of the problems we've had, the U.S. government has had generally, is a lack of trust in our government and government institutions because of the misconduct of individuals who have created a lack of confidence in our intelligence community, including the CIA and other agencies. But my hope is that now that new administration's in place, that will no longer be the concern that it was previously. Specifically, you and I talked about FISA 702, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act 702. In your lengthy experience as an intelligence officer, have you found that authority to be useful?
Thank you for the question, Senator, and I appreciated our chance to chat in your office. As a career CIA officer, I used information collected under FISA Section 02, information on a very regular basis. As I expressed to you in our previous chat, I believe that this authority is critical to U.S. national security. I believe that while valid concerns have been raised at various points about how the process is used, that the reforms that were undertaken last year largely addressed those concerns, and that this is an essential tool that should be reauthorized.
And you don't see any need for any additional reforms at this time?
Senator, I would just commit that if confirmed, I would be very happy to work with the oversight committees to look at whether additional reforms are needed. But personally, I am confident that sufficient safeguards currently are in place to ensure the privacy and civil liberties of Americans are respected.
Thank you. Mr. Kent, let me ask you, Senator Kelly talked about foreign terrorist organizations. As you know, the cartels in Mexico have now been designated as such. And obviously, the scourge of fentanyl is the leading cause of death of young people between the age of 18 and 45 in this country. Unfortunately, Mexico has a serious problem with the cartels and the fact that corruption makes it exceedingly difficult for us or for the Mexican government itself to deal with this threat. How would you prioritize the threat of drug trafficking organizations like the drug cartels in Mexico? How would you approach that? And are there things that are not being done now that you think should be done?
Thank you, Senator. I agree with President Trump that we have to take on these cartels like we take on terrorists. I mean, the cartels have killed hundreds of thousands of Americans over the years with fentanyl, so I'm glad that we're finally taking this seriously. So number one, I think supporting what's taking place right now on the southern border and making sure we have strong border security so we can prevent the fentanyl from coming into the country, that's essential. I think we also need to work hand in hand with the Mexican government. I think most of us in the intelligence community have been pleasantly surprised to see how cooperative the Mexican government has been. It seems that they want to take out these cartels as well. So working with the Mexican government, enabling them to take out these cartels, these cartel leaders. But then I do think we need to trace the precursor trail back to where it originates. And much of the precursors, the ingredients for fentanyl, it's coming from China. Some of it is coming from India. So we're going to need hard diplomacy. We're going to need to use economic leverage to make sure that we cut off the fentanyl precursors from actually entering Mexico as well.
And Mr. Eisenberg, do you agree with me that the People's Republic of China, under the control of President Xi and the Chinese Communist Party, endeavor to undermine the United States at nearly all cost in order to achieve their ambitions of dominance?
Senator, yeah, I certainly agree that China is our main and most existential long-term competitor.
And with that in mind, should American entities be investing in sensitive technologies in China only for them to develop, deploy, and weaponize them against us in furtherance of their goals?
That's a difficult question that I actually have just never looked into.
I know it's a difficult question. That's why I ask you.
Can I phone a friend? No.
Why don't you lean forward a little bit so I can hear you a little bit?
Yeah, that's something I would look into if I were confirmed. I can see issues. I can see issues on both sides of it. Why? Obviously, there's a good reason to not do that if you're an American company, for example. But I can also understand why engagement is also a reasonable strategy. But you know, if I were an American company, I would be very, very hesitant to get involved with that.
Well, unfortunately, the attraction of the huge Chinese market and the money that would be generated from that seems to drive decisions about investments in China. But we have, as you may know, the Fight China Act, the Foreign Investment Guardrails to help thwart China Act is one that would provide some outbound investment transparency particularly in the sensitive technologies that we are working on with the administration. Right now, we're working with the Treasury Department and others to try to provide technical assistance so we can get this right. But I look forward to working with you and the rest of the intelligence community to get this done. I think it's absolutely critical. Inadvertently, American companies are providing the financial resources necessary not only to modernize the Chinese economy, but to help them modernize their weapons and their military in a way that will allow them then to achieve their ambition, for example, of taking Taiwan by military force. And it makes no sense to me that we would inadvertently encourage or allow that with and be blind to the consequences. So thank you for your answer, and thank you for each of you for being here and your willingness to serve.
Senator King, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Kent, thank you for your testimony. I walked in when you were from voting when you were talking about the threat of terrorism, and I'm glad you identify that because I think it is a serious threat, and I think we've sort of taken our eye off that ball. So I compliment you on that. I did want to ask you, though, you mentioned the withdrawal from Afghanistan. Do you know when that decision was made and who made it?
To withdraw from Afghanistan?
Yes.
It appears that it was not very well coordinated, and it probably wasn't made all at the same time, but it was made somewhere around August of 2021.
Actually, it was made in February of 2020 by President Trump when he signed the Doha Agreement, which basically said we will leave Afghanistan by May of 2021 as long as the Taliban doesn't shoot at us. That discussion did not include the Afghan government. So the decision to leave Afghanistan was actually made by the Trump administration a year and a half before the actual withdrawal. You're aware of that, I trust.
Actually, it happened in multiple phases. President Trump attempted to get us out ahead of that, but then we had members of the intelligence community, unfortunately, and we had members of the media who spread an extension of the Russia hoax, who said that Putin was putting bounties on the heads of American soldiers, and that stopped Congress from allocating money. Yeah, the Russia hoax.
The Russia hoax. Are you aware that on August 2nd, 2016, then candidate Trump's campaign manager, Paul Manafort, had dinner in New York with an agent of Russian intelligence, Konstantin Kilimnik, and shared the internal polling data of the Trump campaign. Do you still consider that a hoax?
Senator, the Russia hoax has been widely debunked. What I was talking about in Afghanistan is how we had an agreement with the Taliban. We fought the Taliban to the negotiating
Just
table.
respond to my question.
Biden
Are you aware
came
of that
in.
dinner between a Russian agent and the chairman of the Trump
Myself
campaign?
and the American people are aware of the origin of the Steele dossier and probably chapter and verse of the Russia hoax. It's been widely debunked.
You've been a pretty good job of not talking about that dinner. Have you ever been involved in politics? Do you know how significant internal polling data is? It tells you where your strengths are, where your weaknesses are, where the battleground states are, what issues. I think that information being handed over to an agent of Russian intelligence, and by the way, this was found unanimously by this committee in our report on the Russian involvement in the 2016 election. So, well, let's move on. You mentioned several times there was no classified information in that telephone call, in that signal chat. So you don't consider the timing of an attack, the weapons being used, and when those weapons are going to be deployed as sensitive, otherwise classified. I realize it wasn't formally classified, but if you had done that as a junior staffer at the National Security Council, wouldn't you have been fired to hand out that kind of information on an insecure public platform?
There was no classified information in that signal chat.
So telling telling an adversary when the attack is going to happen, that's not classified? I mean, you're saying it's not classified. That you're just giving it a bit of semantics. But any person in this room would tell us that attack plans involving timing and weapons would be of immense value. If it had been the Houthis instead of Jeff Goldberg, we would have lost pilots in that strike, would we not?
There was no classified information, and it's currently under litigation, Senator, so I really
Okay.
can't say much more about the signal chatter.
And you can't even tell us what telephone you were using. What possible litigation excuse is there for not telling us what telephone you were using?
The details of the signal chat are currently under litigation, so there's not much more I can say.
What's the litigation?
There's litigation against multiple members that were in the chat group right now.
Well, you say it's not classified. If it walks like a duck and looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's classified. Mr. Eisenberg, the annual threat assessment tells us that our adversaries, Russia, China, Iran, are stepping up covert influence. And yet in the administration, in the Department of, I guess I'd call it the department formerly known as Justice, the administration's disbanded the Foreign Influence Task Force. And it's also stopped U.S. enforcement of the Foreign Agents Registration Act. How is that possibly going to make this country safer in light of the intelligence community's assessment a month ago that foreign influence was a rising threat to this country? I call that unilateral disarmament.
Senator, I believe the memo you're referring to.
Could you get closer to your microphone, please?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes, please.
The memo you refer to doesn't end all FARA enforcement. It limits FARA criminal enforcement to a specific set of traditional espionage with foreign powers. It certainly doesn't end all FARA enforcement. And the fact that
it narrows FARA enforcement, does it not?
Yes, it narrows it. And the fact that an entity no longer exists doesn't mean that the people that have the skills that were previously in the department are no longer there.
Do you know whether or not those people are still there or they've been fired?
I don't. I do not. I'm not in NSD now, and I do not know.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I recognize myself. Thanks to each of you for your service and for your willingness to continue to serve. Mr. Eisenberg, you mentioned about the threat from China, but if you would elaborate a bit on that and then also talk about what changes and priority shifts are necessary to posture the U.S. to counter the threat posed by the CCP.
Sure. I think, first of all, I should say that it's been about 4 years since I've reviewed intelligence. But it's clear that China is our main strategic competitor in the world and wishes us a long and happy retirement in which we buy their goods and they don't sell ours there. And I think that it's a situation in which we should use all instruments of national power in order to help the United States get better footing in that war, in that battle. What exactly that looks like is something I can't say at the moment. I would be something I would look into if I were confirmed.
Thank you. Mr. Lukas, the same question, particularly the part about what priority shifts are necessary to posture us to better counter the threat posed by the CCP.
Thank you, Senator. I do recognize, and the intelligence community recognizes, that China is America's key strategic adversary. I can assure you that the IC is currently postured in a way that prioritizes collection on China across many fronts. In terms of what additional posturing we might need to do in that area, unfortunately, I'm not in a position to comment on that right now. If confirmed, though, I would be happy to work with both the committee and with you one-on-one to come up with a plan for moving forward in that area.
Thank you. Mr. Kent, enjoyed time with you several weeks ago. So as an experienced professional in the counterterrorism fight, what do you see are the benefits of applying the CT mindset that you've used over the years to a counter-narcotics problem that we see coming from the southern border, or maybe even the northern border, just the CT to the counter-narcotics challenge?
Thank you, Senator. I also enjoyed our conversation in your office. I think we learned a lot of lessons over the past 20-plus years about how we defeat decentralized networks, the best way to attack those nodes, and in particular, the best way to integrate intelligence fusion, and making sure that intelligence is getting in the hands of those who are on the front lines, whether that's guys that are overseas kicking in doors or whether that's in the hands of our patrolmen and our sheriff's deputies that are out there patrolling our streets.
Thank you for that. Mr. Lukas, back to you. I enjoyed your opening comments and also your history. So you've been there, you've done that, but let me get your thoughts as a potential PD, DNI, if confirmed. You're going to be responsible for the IC's budget, or at least for crafting it. So what's your vision for making it more efficient while still being assured that we have the most effective intelligence capability?
Thank you, Senator. If I'm confirmed as PD DNI, of course, my primary role will be to support Director Gabbard in her overseeing of the U.S. intelligence community budget. I think the key role for ODNI, the important thing to remember is deconfliction. That is what ODNI needs to do. We need to make sure from that position that the various agencies, the 18 agencies of the intelligence community, are not wasting money spending on things that are duplicative, and that's the unique value that ODNI brings to that. So if confirmed, I can pledge to you that I'll work both with Director Gabbard, with the IC's Chief Financial Officer to ensure that ODNI is carrying out that duty in a diligent way.
So I think in life, having a to-do list is second to having a stop-doing list. Do you have, in this setting, anything you could share with us that would be on the stop-doing list?
Senator, I have, over the years, seen a lot of things that I think the IC should probably stop doing. Unfortunately, in this setting, it's very difficult to speak about those because some of those are vulnerabilities and things that we would not like to discuss in an open hearing. I would be happy to come back and meet with you or
We'll talk later.
Or talk later in a classified setting.
I understand.
Thank you.
Mr. Kent and also Mr. Lukas, if there's time. Mr. Kent, you've served at the CIA. So how important is it that the IC not be politicized and that policymakers and operations officers are receiving unbiased, objective intelligence?
Nothing could be more important, Senator. We have to take the politicization out of the intelligence community. We have to make sure that the truth gets up to those who are making policy and to those that are on the front lines in harm's way. So if confirmed, you'll have my commitment that NCTC will be non-political and focus solely on going after our nation's enemies.
Any thoughts there, Mr. Lukas?
Senator, I absolutely share Mr. Kent's thoughts on that issue. The intelligence community has nothing if it doesn't have the trust of the policymakers that it seeks to serve. It's absolutely important and critical, in fact, for us to provide apolitical, unbiased intelligence that policymakers can rely on.
Thank you all. Senator Wyden?
One sec. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In my view, Mr. Kent's extremist views, which are well known in the Pacific Northwest, thoroughly disqualify him from any leadership position, certainly one that addresses who is and isn't a terrorist. So I'm going to begin with your ominous record, Mr. Eisenberg. While working in the Bush administration's Department of Justice, you contributed to memos that authorized illegal surveillance. Yet, so far, you've refused to provide any details about this work. Even worse is that in some cases, you've refused to acknowledge that the reforms passed by Congress to address these abuses are actually binding. So in 2008, Congress passed legislation reconfirming that the government needs a warrant to conduct surveillance in the United States. That was in direct response to the memo you helped write that said the president has inherent authority to conduct warrantless surveillance. I sent you a question asking whether the 2008 law requiring a warrant is binding. You said yes, but only to the extent that law is constitutional. So I'd like to give you another chance. Is that law binding? Or do you believe there could be some constitutional argument that would allow the president to get around the law?
As an initial matter, Senator, you're asking me about things I worked on like 20 years ago that I don't have access to, so it's pretty hard for me to remember all of the details.
It's not a complicated question, sir. It's about whether or not you're for warrantless surveillance. Yes or no? Just tell me about it. Warrantless surveillance as a policy matter, because that's what this is about.
You're asking if I think as a policy matter we should have warrantless surveillance?
Yeah, I mean, certainly your answer when we got the response said, yes, the 2008 law requires a warrant, And then you qualified it only to the extent that the law is constitutional. So what's your position on warrantless surveillance?
Those are two totally separate questions. Are you asking me as a policy matter what I think about warrantless surveillance, or are you asking me as a legal matter?
Is the law binding, or do you believe that there can be some constitutional argument that would allow the president to get around the law?
Senator, so without being able to talk to a bunch of other lawyers and think about all of the possible circumstances, I'm just unwilling to say that a law could never be unconstitutional as applied. There's always a possibility for some application to be unconstitutional, and it's, I think the careful lawyer would always note that.
That's not what the law says. In 2015, Congress passed legislation prohibiting bulk collection of phone and email records. This was in direct response to the revelation that the government had collected the records of millions of innocent Americans. So here I asked you whether bulk collection is, as Congress clearly intended, currently illegal. You responded that it depends on the facts and the law and that it's a hypothetical. So again, I'd like to give you another chance. Is bulk collection of phone and email records currently illegal?
I can't say without thinking more about it. These are complicated questions of constitutional law and statutory interpretation. The OLC opinion on the surveillance that we discussed earlier is like 70 pages or something. They're very long and detailed arguments. It's not something I can give just an off-the-cuff answer with 3 minutes of looking. Those are difficult questions.
You have been working in these areas for years and years, Mr. Eisenberg. The reality is these are straightforward propositions embedded in black letter text, and you won't give an answer. I'm going to hold the record open so that you can continue to ruminate on this, which you apparently feel is necessary to answer what I think is a straightforward question. I'll wrap up with one other one, and we'll see what your response is on this. In October of 2022, the Department of Justice issued a policy restricting collection of information on journalists. Director Gabbard said she supported continuing that policy. She said it was essential to protecting press freedoms and maintaining the critical balance between national security and upholding the First Amendment. Mr. Lukas, who is sitting at the table with you, agrees with Director Gabbard. So once again, we're talking about a pretty straightforward policy position, and I'd like to know what your views are. Mr. Eisenberg.
Senator, I'm sorry. I can't answer what I think of a policy I have never had an opportunity even to review.
So Director Gabbard says she supports the policy, but that is immaterial to you.
No, that's not immaterial. That's something I would certainly weigh into, but you're asking for my opinion, and I'm just saying I can't do that without having reviewed the actual policy you're asking about. I can't tell you what I think of a policy I have never seen.
And you haven't ever heard about this. This is an issue of first impression for you. You've never heard about it till this afternoon.
The devil's in the details, Senator, so I do not know the details of the policy.
This is black letter text. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Young.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Eisenberg, the Trump administration has rightly put focus on disrupting and deterring China's malign influence within the United States. From a legal perspective, and with the tools and authorities of the Department of Justice in mind, what do you see as the most urgent actions that we should be pursuing to stop this malign influence, disrupt IP theft, and economic and tech espionage?
Thanks for the question, Senator. For a more complete answer, I'd certainly want to be able to discuss it with the professionals inside of NSD.
Yeah, okay.
But it seems to me that making sure that we have all of the intelligence collection that we can in order to find all of our vulnerabilities and adequate cybersecurity would be, very good starts.
So an inventory of the cyber capabilities, and how would you go about that?
I would talk to the people who have those abilities and who are in charge of those around, not just in the Department of Justice, but around the intelligence community. see the status.
People like,
NSA, various other intelligence organizations that do these things.
if confirmed, what laws and regulations do you anticipate relying on in executing your role and NSD's role in this priority of cyberspace?
Well, Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act would be one, to be able to collect the necessary intelligence to find our vulnerabilities. And essentially, any tool to collect information that we have, I think, would be very important in order to ascertain, to learn as much as we can about our various vulnerabilities.
And have you reviewed and are you deeply familiar with the laws and regulations that would govern your position, your conduct, and your responsibilities?
I'm quite familiar with some of them, like the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, but there are quite a number that the National Security Division administers. So I'm more familiar with some than I am with others, but fortunately we have a lot of experts around the department and the various other authorities.
Thank you. Mr. Lukas, I think we share a view that we need more people from all kinds of backgrounds and experiences as we reform and fix the IC's analytical enterprise, bringing different perspectives and ideas to the fore. If confirmed, can you speak to what your priorities would be in attracting, recruiting, and retaining such a workforce?
Yes, thank you, Senator, and I appreciated our conversation in your office where we talked about this topic. My view is that particularly the analytical cadre of the U.S. intelligence community needs a wide diversity of backgrounds, skills, and viewpoints. That's quite different than having a political dogma called diversity, equity, inclusion. Part of that would be reaching out in terms of our recruitment efforts, looking across the countries to universities where the IC has not traditionally been active, and looking to just bring in a much broader community of new analysts who are then able to work on the questions facing our nation.
Thank you. Yeah, I find that any organization runs best if it's open to free exchange and an honest, even a brutal confrontation with the truth, and have heated arguments behind closed doors before important decisions are made and all the rest. And it seems like you embrace that ethic and culture. Is that an accurate characterization?
Yes, Senator, that's an accurate characterization.
What tangible actions would you recommend to the director in furtherance of good decision-making as it relates to receiving different ideas and perspectives?
Advising the director, I think it will be critical for her to be in regular contact with the heads of the IC agencies, to be understanding how they are conducting their recruitment, what sort of cultures they are trying to build, based around objectivity and non-politicization of intelligence. She really needs to dig in and understand what problems the community is facing, and I believe we have a director who's already doing that.
All right. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Young. Senator Collins has a follow-up question.
Thank you. Mr. Kent, you had an exchange earlier about our country's withdrawal from Afghanistan. In fact, that withdrawal, which was poorly executed and resulted in the deaths of 13 service members, occurred during the Biden administration, not the first Trump administration. Is that correct?
That's correct, Senator.
Thank you.
I bet he's very happy you gave him a chance to correct the record on that one. Senator Warner, I understand you have a follow-up?
I just wanted to, again, I appreciate, again, everybody's service. I've been pretty disappointed by some of your answers. And I just, Mr. Kent, again, appreciate your service, and you got two great boys there. And you have your absolute right to have the views that, all these bad things emanated from President Biden. And, frankly, on a number of those things, I agree. But I'll just say I don't want to expect a response or comment, but I just cannot believe that if Joe Biden's administration had as carelessly handled classified information, that you wouldn't have been one of the first calling for accountability and responsibility. And I'm disappointed in that that's not the case here. And again, I just will go back to the comment I made that at the end of the day, I imagine all three of you gentlemen will be confirmed. But when you take that oath, it's an oath to a constitution and not a single individual. And I just hope and pray that you'll, when you're in these positions, you'll be willing to speak truth to power. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Gentlemen, as I mentioned earlier, it's my intention to hold a committee vote on your nominations as soon as possible. Therefore, for planning purposes, any member who wishes to submit questions for the record after today's hearing, please do so by close of business tomorrow. I'm confident that we can expect prompt answers from our nominees to those questions for the record. I do expect, given that many of our members were absent due to other business this afternoon, you may have a few more of those written questions than normal. So we would appreciate your prompt attention. Mr. Kent, Mr. Lukas, I expect to move to your nomination when we return from our April work period in our states. Mr. Eisenberg, you still need to appear before the Judiciary Committee, and we'll move promptly forward once that appearance has occurred. So thank you all. The hearing is adjourned.